It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as we have news regarding Karrion Kross's WWE main roster run. We look at the AEW locker room's reaction to CM Punk signing for the promotion, and the Hangman Page vs Kenny Omega match at All Out has been scrapped. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first... This Wednesday, we saw AEW present the Fight for the Fallen special of Dynamite live from the Bojangles Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina. Once again, AEW managed to stay above the 1 million viewer mark, drawing in an average of 1.108 million viewers on TNT. However, this is in fact down 3.5% from last week's show, which drew an average of 1.148 million viewers. They were up 2.8% in the key demo, going from a 0.44 to a 0.45, which represents roughly 582,000 viewers who watched the show between the ages of 18 and 49. Despite the slight drop overall, this is in fact AEW's fourth biggest viewership in history and the third best this year. The show was also up 43% from the same week last year, which shows tremendous long-term growth for the Jacksonville promotion. Now that NXT is no longer going head-to-head with AEW, the return of crowds as well as a ton of buzz around the promotion has seen AEW continue to grow their audience, with higher ratings expected going forward. They will no doubt see a bump following the expected debuts of Bryan Danielson and CM Punk. We now have a report from What Culture, with sources informing them that a producer was quietly released from WWE in April of this year. Jeff Jarrett, who was inducted into the 2018 Hall of Fame, joined WWE on a full-time basis in January 2019, working backstage as a producer whilst also making sporadic appearances on the show, including an appearance in the Royal Rumble. Before this, Jarrett had heat with the company for many years after reportedly holding up Vince McMahon for money in 2000 whilst refusing to drop the IC title before jumping back to WCW. When WWF bought out WCW in 2001, Vince McMahon fired Jarrett on air as soon as he could. He wouldn't be seen in WWE until his eventual Hall of Fame induction years later. His release is likely what allowed him to start up his new podcast My World, with the first trailer for the show being released on April 9th. Next up, trading card company Upper Deck have announced a partnership with All Elite Wrestling to produce a series of trading cards featuring the promotion's stars. The news was announced at the recent National Sports Collectors Convention. In November 2020, the cards were teased on Being the Elite, with various talents being shown signing sticker sheets to be placed on collectors' versions of their cards. No release date has been officially announced, but they are expected to hit shelves sometime in the near future. And will you be collecting AEW trading cards? Let me know in the comments down below. Actor Stephen Amell spoke with Busted Open Radio this week to discuss his upcoming TV show Heels, where he plays the main character Jack Spade. The show is centered around the world of wrestling and also features a cameo from CM Punk. Amell is no stranger to pro wrestling, having worked 3 matches in the past, teaming with Neville to defeat King Barrett and Stardust at SummerSlam 2015. He was also an honorary member of the Bullet Club in a 5-man tag match in Ring of Honor, as well as most recently wrestling Christopher Daniels at All In, which was the precursor to AEW. In the interview, Amell revealed that he has some unfinished business, expressing his desire to return to wrestling, but as a heel, and even said he's been speaking to Cody Rhodes about an AEW appearance, and this is what he said. I'd be lying if I hadn't said that I hadn't been poking and prodding Cody and stuff like that. It's time for me, not just for the show, for the namesake, but just in general, it's time for me to take a heel turn. I'm sick and tired of just being a celebrity guest spot who's happy to be there. It's time for me to take a steel chair and just kick the shit out of somebody. When Amell did wrestle in the past, he actually did a great job, but let me know what you think of Stephen Amell having a run in AEW in the comments down below. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. Karrion Kross recently made his WWE main roster debut, losing to Jeff Hardy in just mere minutes. The following week, he picked off Keith Lee to get his first win on the Raw brand. Despite this win, the original plan is said to have been to have Kross lose once again to Jeff Hardy. This was before Hardy tested positive for COVID. So far, there has been a glaring absence from his presentation, with his real-life girlfriend Scarlett, who acts as his manager in NXT, nowhere to be seen. We have an update from Andrew Zarian of the Mat Men podcast that the plan has been for Kross to keep losing until Scarlett shows up. Kross is set to main event the next NXT TakeOver event on Sunday, August 22nd, which is the day after SummerSlam. He will defend his NXT Championship against Samoa Joe, with many expecting this to be his farewell to the black and gold brand, dropping his title as to continue his main roster run. WWE have totally dropped the ball on the call-up of NXT's top guy, stripping him of his unique entrance and manager. Perhaps they'll eventually give him back his whole presentation, but first impressions count for a lot. His entrance alone with Scarlett makes him a star, but so far that has been nowhere to be seen. Next up, we have the backstage reaction to CM Punk joining AEW, with Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net once again providing us with an update. Haynes revealed the AEW locker room's reaction to the signing of Punk and said talent only heard the news once reports started coming out. He said, "They were finding out, most of them, at the same time all of us were. I think very few people knew about that one. As far as I know, everybody seems to be really excited that I've got to talk to, because this is huge for them. I don't think anybody harbours any real bad feelings towards him except the Punk Colt Cobana thing, which is interesting with him being a producer and they're going to be in the back, so how's that going to happen? They're going to have to interact at some point." When CM Punk left WWE in 2014, he appeared on Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast to discuss his time with the company, running down WWE's Doctor. Shortly after the podcast, the Doctor then filed a lawsuit for defamation, not only on Punk but also his friend Colt. They were found not guilty, but Punk allegedly promised to pay Cabana's legal fees, with the latter later issuing a lawsuit against his old friend. The case was thrown out, but this caused a huge rift between the two, and it's currently unknown if the former best friends have made up. It may be pretty awkward if they cross each other's paths, if not. As for the other wrestlers, Punk is obviously a huge signing which will only bring more eyes onto the rest of the roster. And finally, many fans were shocked this past week on AEW Dynamite after the result of the opening match. Hangman Page teamed up with 4 members of the Dark Order to take on the Elite in a 5-man tag team elimination match. If Page's team were able to come out on top, he would receive a future shot at Kenny Omega's AEW World Championship, with 2 members of the Dark Order earning a shot at the Young Bucks' AEW tag team titles. In the end, the match ended in favour of the Elite, with Page eventually falling to a belt shot and a one-winged angel. Fans assumed that this was merely a bump in the road, with the main event of All Out still set to be Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega for the title, but apparently these plans have changed. Dave Meltzer noted in the Wrestling Observer that Page is in fact not in line to be in the main event of the pay-per-view, and this is what he had to say. Adam Page is not in the main event for All Out with Kenny Omega. At one point it was the plan, but plans change. The 10-man tag was designed to shock people when they veered off that match, but one would think they will be going to it later. As we know, Dave Meltzer is close to AEW president Tony Khan, as well as many others in the company, so this is either true or he's been asked to report it to get more people behind Hangman Page. It has been reported over the past few days from various sources that AEW are currently in the process of changing their plans due to their latest signings, and this seems to have now affected the All Out pay-per-view. Perhaps this was the plan all along, but something tells me that it wasn't. It's difficult to see who else could go up against Omega, with the incoming CM Punk and Bryan Danielson being unlikely candidates due to AEW's ranking system. Meltzer did speculate that Omega's next challenger could be Christian Cage or Eddie Kingston, and noted, "They were pushing Christian Cage for a title match next. Whether that's for TV in a few weeks or pay-per-view should be clear pretty soon. They've done angles to where they should do Cage and Eddie Kingston both against Omega, but Christian feels to me like a match for a major Dynamite, and Kingston could headline a pay-per-view, but with the additions maybe a TV match as well." It seems we may have to wait a little bit longer for the inevitable Hangman vs Omega match, which AEW have been building to for 2 years at this point. Whether this change is due to Bryan and Punk, or perhaps just a change of heart, with Khan maybe feeling that Hangman isn't quite at the AEW Championship level just yet, it'll be interesting to see where AEW go from here. But let me know what you make of this situation in the comments down below. And before you go, why not check out my video where I discuss 5 ways that AEW could book the debut of CM Punk.